What is good? Osiris here, stuck in the middle. Thank you for joining. This Russia-Ukraine situation is starting to piss me off as an American citizen. The propaganda machine, the media, the corporate interests, they are so good at getting common people to fight battles that are in their interest. And many common people, in my opinion, forgetting about what's in our best interests. I saw this article on Reuters, and it's about Russia will stop if Ukraine meets these terms. So I'm like, great, that's what I want to hear. Like, what does Russia want? How does this end? Russia has to be clear about what they want. All of this in this whole article seems to be allegedly. But for the sake of our discussion as American citizens or wherever you are, my standpoint is American. Let's talk about this as if these are the demands that Russia wants. What are the crazy demands that Russia wants? Kremlin says it insists on neutrality for Ukraine. Russia will finish demilitarization of the country. That's pretty strong. To me, that sounds like they don't want Ukraine to have any military in the country. Wants Kyiv to recognize breakaway regions, loss of Crimea. Okay, so as an American, where the biggest concern as an American is not even the ramifications of potentially fuel costs and stuff come to mind. If we have a change in fertilizer, that could increase food costs. We've got financial interests. Number one, we want to help the citizens of Russia and Ukraine who had nothing to do with this, who might be some arrested for protesting, some displaced from their homes. For sure, we want to do that. But the other one is we want to avoid nuclear war, don't we? Isn't avoiding a direct war with Russia probably the top priority? Because direct war with Russia means NATO gets involved, means we are that much closer to the end of the earth or end of the U.S., a total annihilation. That's my interest as an American citizen. Are those three demands outrageous? I'll revisit that. That's going to be my end takeaway. But let's take a trip to get there. NATO has added 14 new members since German reunification. So this is basically after the end of World War II. All these countries in these colors, going from dark blue, which is the early on, to pink, to that purple, which are the newer ones. NATO has been moving more and more east towards Russia, towards Ukraine. So that from a Russian standpoint, they're like, well, don't you have enough right now? This is not a pro-Putin stance. My stance is American stance because I don't care about either one of them. What pisses me off is we're doing the same thing that was done against the pandemic. If you have questions, if you have an opinion, then you are anti this or you're pro this. No, I need you to listen to my words very carefully. My only concern is America. Russia has a GDP smaller than the state of Texas, about 1.5 trillion in 2020. Texas was about 2 trillion. Europe should be able to handle this. I'm a guy in my basement. I am not pretending to be some expert. I'm trying to be knowledgeable from the standpoint of how does that affect me and you all may be watching this channel as American citizens in particular. What I would say is I look at the stories, read the news, come to some type of conclusion. And those in Congress, they are the ones who are supposed to be experts. I'm not doing their job for them. And they should be coming to me with the case for why, as an American citizen, I shouldn't be angry out of my ass hearing Lindsey Graham talk about the assassination of Putin on TV and on Twitter. I need my congressperson and everyone in Congress, the House and the Senate and the president, to tell me why that's not reckless and insane. Most people don't approve of war. So Congress, if you want me to approve these escalating terms, most recently, hey, Poland, you can give Ukraine planes. This is escalating. Ukraine can't stop Russia unless there's other help in there. I need to understand, why are we helping this escalate instead of de-escalate if those are the terms? Biden said, you shouldn't be afraid of nuclear war. Well, damn it, give me a reason not to be. I don't want anybody to be scared about that. It's out of our control. I don't put too much worry in that because it's completely out of our control. But what I want to hear is Biden say, we want to go to the table. We want to encourage Ukraine and Russia to go to the table and de-escalate. So when Lindsey Graham says nonsense like that, I need to hear the president, I need to hear everybody say, Lindsey Graham, sit down and shut the hell up. You're making things worse. When that doesn't happen, I know there are people out here who have interest to keep this going and escalating. That's not in the interest of people. These congressional people on the populist right and left, they got together, they did this letter. It's pathetic, to be honest with you. It's good to see Paul Gosar, Matt Gaetz, AOC, Cori Bush on the same letter. Don't get me wrong. But it's what is a letter? Congress needs to approve not just war, because we haven't done any official military, war, but they also need to be approving these sanctions. There are some heavy sanctions going on, and we need to explore all options even before sanctions. And I don't feel like that's happened. So I'm not going to be privy to everything, but that's where I said, Biden, damn it, tell me a reason to have hope that you're actually trying to do something other than sanctions and war. And remember, sanctions hurt common people. These sanctions that they're doing, like, for example, Visa, MasterCard, well, I don't know if that was technically a sanction, but Visa and MasterCard being shut down if it was doled out by a Russian bank. So if you're in Russia, you can still use it, but if you're outside of Russia, you can't. If you're outside of Russia, then you can't use it backwards, vice versa. Those hurt innocent citizens. So I'm getting confused because when I see the propaganda being controlled, and then I see Lindsey Graham saying you should go after Putin, then what it looks like to me is the American government, like Vosh said the other day, choking out innocent citizens, starving them out, making them angry, and then hoping for some type of coup type action in Russia. That doesn't de-escalate things. That doesn't make me safer here in the U.S. So that's why Congress needs to approve these things. You need to put a vote on them. So you stand by it. A letter is not going to do it. The other thing is, when I say these are these reasonable actions, some people might say, well, we don't want to negotiate at this point. I just want to know, are the requests reasonable? Forget about if you wanted to negotiate them or not. Are Russia's requests reasonable? That's the question. And don't blame this on Trump. I'm getting sick of this, everything going against Trump. J6 lies against Trump. Impeachment lies against Trump. Black Lives Matter movement lies against Trump, built only to politically get Trump out of office. Pandemic used against Trump. Misrepresented against Trump. And now Ukraine. When the facts are, when Trump tried to look into Ukraine and potential corruption with the United States government, then he got impeached. It's funny how much is circling around Ukraine. That's what America First is Trump wasn't pro-Putin, and he wasn't pro-Ukraine, and he wasn't pro-NATO. NATO should be able to, as far as NATO without the U.S., basically, Europe should be able to handle this. I don't have any appetite for this. White House wants $10 billion for Ukraine aid. I have no appetite for that. I'm all for helping through Red Cross and other avenues for displaced citizens anywhere in the world. And that has nothing to do with Ukraine. Any citizens who are displaced, maybe citizens that we're bombing right now as we speak, as I do this video, maybe they could get some help too. It's bigger. That part of it is bigger than Ukraine. So when I talk about Ukraine and Russia, I'm talking about the head honchos. When I say they're corrupt, I'm talking about the head honchos in the U.S., head honchos in Ukraine, head honchos in Russia, all corrupt. There was a Ukrainian businessman, Viktor Pinchuk, who was the top donor to the Clinton Foundation. Why does the Clinton Foundation have ties to an oligarch in the Ukrainian business sphere? Of course, he has government ties. Every rich oligarch has government ties. What about Hunter Biden? Paid $1 million a year, salary got cut after his father was no longer vice president. In Ukraine, a Ukrainian energy company. There's too much dirt going on here. We should evaluate global matters from the standpoint of how they affect the lives of American citizens. Russia, as I said, has a relatively small GDP. That means they have relatively small income, relatively small money. They're not going to be able to take over the world. European countries should be able to deal with this. Germany, UK, Spain, all of them, Turkey, Poland, all of them over there should be able to deal with this. The people who should be blamed and they're blaming Trump, the people that should be blamed for this are, number one, the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian government no one should care about the Ukrainian citizens more than the Ukrainian government. Ukraine bet on this ability for them to get into NATO, the Ukrainian government, and they failed. They did not get into NATO. NATO's not doing what they want to do. President Zelensky wants NATO to come in and force a no-fly zone. Basically, he wants war. He knows that will lead to war. The time to save your people isn't now in a bunker. The time was with diplomacy before that. Russia is going to come through. Ukraine can't stop them. So that's why I'm glad to hear he's coming to the table to talk peace. Save your people. That's on the Ukrainian government. That's not on our government. That's not on Biden. That's not on Trump. But the actions now that we're taking, looking for $10 billion, for what? That's money that could be used here. That's taxpayers' money. I know there's a geopolitical argument that once aggression starts, you can't reward it by giving them a seat at the table. Well, I don't think Biden needs to be at the table. Number one, we don't need to be at the table. What we would need to do, when I say agree to these terms, is would we advise Ukraine, you're hemmed up right now, it's a tough situation, you might want to get to the table. Those requests aren't that unreasonable. If I'm wrong, you tell me why those requests, I'm going to list them in the end here again. Why is that unreasonable? It's not, and because it's too late to come to the table, you say, well, there's always already aggression. Why people say that is, if you come to the table, what the message it sends other countries is, okay, let me be the aggressor, invade, and then someone will come to the table with me. So I understand that's not the way you want to do it, but that's not my problem. That's not my problem. You should have came to the table before. And so it's not my problem, not my fault. Fix it. Try to fix it without getting your citizens killed. These are tell me why I'm wrong. Kremlin says it insists on neutrality for Ukraine. What that means is Ukraine doesn't go to NATO. They even want it to be in their constitution that Ukraine will never go to NATO. Okay. I'm an American citizen. I don't care about that. That's fine with me. Why would I care about that? Please help me understand. Why would I care if the Kremlin says Ukraine has to be neutral? Why should I care? Why wouldn't I say fine? You see why they don't want Congress to have to approve war, because most people probably would be where I am that have nothing to do with me. Don't care. Not sending money, not having anybody die, no need to do sanctions and disrupt the whole global economy. Fine. I'm fine with number one. Number two, Russia will finish demilitarization of the country. That's a threat? I know. I'm not for Russia. But the fact is, Ukraine's going to be demilitarized whether they want it by force or not. They're not going to be able to stop Russia. So I say do it by peace. That's just me. If I was in Ukraine, I would say just work something out. And I think my impression is that means you have no military. What does that have to? I don't. As an American, I don't care. I don't care if as an American, Ukraine never has a military. I don't care. I want peace there, but I don't care if they don't have a military. Why should I care? And then the last one wants Kyiv to recognize breakaway regions, loss of Crimea. I'm fine with that too. So basically that's giving Russia, they're saying that they're independent, but they're really Russian states, basically. The people who live there associate with Russia. They'd be pro-Russia. Okay, what does it have to do with me? I don't care. If hypothetically those three things avoid direct conflict with Russia. Remember, it's not just us. You don't want anyone in NATO to have direct conflict with Russia, because that means we are in it. Everybody's in it. It's like a gang. So I don't want that. I don't want a world war. I don't want nukes. Hypothetically, if those are the only three things, where does Ukraine sign? So what that would mean is the U.S. should say, if that's what Russia really wants, we're not sending any more help in. We'll help the citizens get out and all that. We're not helping your government. We're not helping you fight it anymore. We're already buying oil from Russia. I mean, it's not, as far as the percentage of oil we get, it's not a huge amount. But regardless, Russia's GDP is not huge. We're funding them. So that doesn't make any sense for us to be funding Russia, then getting $10 billion for Ukraine. Y'all aren't making sense right now. Let me know what you think. Take care.